Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today. As just mentioned, I'm Mike Brennan. I'm the director of the National Hurricane Center and here in Miami, part of the National Weather Service. Been in this role now for a little over about 3.5 months, but I have a long history here at NHC going back about 15 years or so as a hurricane forecaster, and have dealt with many of these natural disasters and many of these billion-dollar disasters that we've just heard about, and that we'll hear about more from NCEI. I want to give you a little bit of an overview of what we do at the Hurricane Center, our products, and how they are used to help communities stay resilient in the face of tropical storms and hurricanes, and talk a little bit about what we're expecting for the 2023 hurricane season and some changes to a couple of our products. And then I'll finish up with a little bit of a review of fatality trends in tropical storms and hurricanes in the United States over the past 10 years or so. You just heard our mission and vision, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but we are focused primarily on what I'll talk about today is our mission associated with tropical storms and hurricanes, which bring multiple hazards to both land and marine areas. But we also have a marine mission as well for forecasting for ocean-going vessels over the high seas that have a tremendous role in the blue economy and overall commerce in the United States. In our area of responsibility includes the energy industry coming in and out of the Gulf of Mexico, traffic moving through the Panama Canal across the tropical and subtropical Atlantic and Eastern Pacific. But I am going to focus on the hurricane mission today. So we are, for the United States, we try to be the clear, calm, trusted voice in the storm. We are responsible for issuing tropical storm and hurricane and storm surge watches and warnings to the United States coastline. We also have a huge international mission where we are providing forecast information to over 20 countries across the Caribbean, Central America, Mexico, Bermuda, Canada, and across the Atlantic and Eastern North Pacific basins. So what our products do, we follow the storm, a tropical storm or hurricane through its entire life cycle. So we're really looking at the big picture, and we're sort of guiding that big picture forecast and messaging for a system its entire life cycle, all the way from before it's even a tropical depression through its strengthening to a tropical storm or hurricane, and then sometimes even after it's no longer a hurricane, as long as it's still threatening land areas. So our forecasts go out 5 days. We provide a track forecast, a forecast of how strong the peak winds are associated with the storm, how large is the storm's wind field, and then we really try to focus on the hazards and impacts, and I'll talk a little bit more about those hazard products in a minute. In the United States, all the local National Weather Service forecast offices across the country are using our products and downscaling that forecast information down to the community level, the county, city, municipality, regional level, where there's those protective actions are really being driven in terms of evacuations and other life safety decisions that are made by the emergency management community for the general public, but also across multiple sectors of commerce, transportation, and commercial sectors as people try to respond and keep themselves safe from tropical storms and hurricanes. But the real focus is on the hazards, and what we've moved towards over the past few years is a focus on probabilistic hazard-based products. So there are multiple hazards associated with tropical storms and hurricanes. That's what makes them such dangerous weather phenomenon. But the biggest hazard is water. So storm surge has the potential to kill the most people in a single day in tropical storms and hurricanes, like we saw tragically last year in Hurricane Ian in Southwest Florida. So we have a big focus and an increased focus on storm surge products. We have specific warnings and watches to highlight areas that are at danger of life-threatening inundation from storm surge. You can see that down here in the lower left. In the lower middle graphic, we have what we call a potential inundation map, and that is a planning tool for emergency managers and others showing a reasonable worst-case scenario of storm surge inundation above ground level associated with the hurricane that takes into account the uncertainty in the forecast, because decisions are being made 3, 4, maybe even 5 days in advance of the storm when there's significant uncertainty as to the track, the intensity, and the size. And those will all have a huge impact on the exact footprint and magnitude and location of the various hazards. We also have an increased focus on rainfall. Rainfall has been responsible for more fatalities in tropical storms and hurricanes than any other hazard in the last 10 years. So our partners at the NOAA Weather Prediction Center in the DC area are responsible for rainfall and flash flood forecasting across the United States. So we highlight their products. We also have products that look at the risk of winds. What are your risk of seeing tropical storm or hurricane force winds at a given location? And when will those winds arrive? And that timing of arrival of tropical storm force winds is a key decision point for evacuations and other preparedness activities. And again, all of these products take into account uncertainty, because that's such a key component. We know that our forecasts have errors. They're never going to be perfect. And so to provide people actionable information, we have to rely on probabilities. So what are we looking for the Atlantic hurricane season this year? This is NOAA's seasonal forecast that came out in May. There'll be an update coming out early next month, but a little more uncertainty than usual this year in the overall picture for the Atlantic basin. You can see the largest probability, 40% chances for near normal activity. So we're forecasting a range of tropical storms of about 12 to 17, 5 to 9 hurricanes, and 1 to 4 of those becoming major hurricanes. But you can also see there's almost an equal chance of a below or above normal season, either above or below those typical ranges. And that's due to competing factors going on in the basin that I'll talk about in just a minute. So far this season, we've had 5 named storms already. We had 1 hurricane that formed in the last week or two, Hurricane Don up in the North Atlantic. We haven't had any major hurricanes yet, but the bulk of the season is still to come. The vast majority of the activity in the Atlantic basin occurs between August and October every year. So the peak of the season is very much upon us here in the next few weeks. As I mentioned, we've had 5 named storms. We had an unnamed system back in January, and we've gone through Dawn. The next named storm will be Emily in the list this year. And I talked about those competing factors. So we have very favorable conditions in the Atlantic basin for tropical storm and hurricane activity. You've probably heard about the very warm Atlantic Ocean waters. Out in the tropical Atlantic, the sea surface temperatures, even in June, were at the levels we would normally see at the peak of hurricane season in August or September. But the competing factors on the other side is the development of El Nino in the Pacific Ocean, which tends to increase upper level winds and sinking motion across part of the deep tropics that tends to suppress tropical storm and hurricane activity on average in the Atlantic. And so we'll see these sort of competing factors battle it out over the next weeks and months, and that will determine the overall character of the Atlantic season. However, even when we have El Nino or we have otherwise quiet, below normal hurricane seasons in terms of activity, that doesn't mean that we can't have significant hurricane impacts in the United States and elsewhere in the basin. So the main message we always provide to everyone is you have to be prepared, you have to be ready for a storm to impact you every year because that chance is there. One big issue that we're facing is short lead times. And we've seen several of these storms that have developed close to land and made landfall within 3 to 4 days within the last few years, including all the category 4 and 5 landfalls in the United States, Hurricane Ian last year, going back to category 5 Michael in 2018. These are the strongest hurricanes that have hit the United States in the past 100 years. And all of them were tropical storms 3 days before landfall. These are rapidly intensifying storms that develop close to land and then make landfall at or near their peak intensity. And this is a huge challenge for preparedness activities along the Gulf Coast and in Florida, where we tend to see these rapidly intensifying storms close to land. So this speaks to having very short timelines. You need to have that 3 to 4 day hurricane plan in place to be able to respond to a storm that develops quickly and then makes landfall at a very high intensity. Some changes we made to products for 2023. We're starting to forecast formation of tropical depressions and tropical storms out farther into the future. We've extended our tropical weather outlook product now out from 5 days into the future to 7 days. And this is sort of our daily flagship situational awareness product that's issued every 6 hours from May 15th to November 30th. It shows you the systems that the Hurricane Center is monitoring that could go on and become tropical depressions or tropical storms now over the next week. So for systems forming close to land, this can give people a little extra heads up. We've had several systems. We've got a system in the Outlook now. But again, this is the sort of day-to-day product that people check. And it's going to be your first indication that there may be an uptick in activity in the basin. We've also improved our storm surge predictions and products. We had a new version of our storm surge model was implemented into operations earlier this spring. It allows us to make real-time forecasts for 2 storms at the same time and also extend our real-time forecast information out to as much as 72 hours in advance of the onset of the hazardous conditions. We've also been able to improve storm surge products for Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And we have this peak storm surge graphic here that you see on the right that we've been experimenting with for several years is now operational. And this gives you a high-level overview of the expected storm surge inundation along the immediate coastline in those highlighted areas. I want to talk quickly about fatalities. I mentioned that freshwater flooding is the biggest killer and has been the biggest killer in tropical storms and hurricanes over the last 10 years in the United States. I should note that these numbers do not include the effects of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico in 2017, but these are about 440 fatalities. Most of them are due to water in some way, shape, or form, either freshwater flooding, storm surge, or waves and rip current fatalities. Wind is responsible for about 10% or 12% of the fatalities themselves. So even though wind gets a lot of the attention, it's water that kills the most people. I want to move next to the indirect fatalities, which are largely fatalities that occur after the storm. They are not directly due to the forces of the storm itself, but would not have occurred if there hadn't been a tropical storm or hurricane. And these are largely related to long duration, large scale power outages. And these can be causes such as improper generator use causing carbon monoxide poisoning, cardiac arrest, heat related fatalities due to lack of air conditioning, issues related to lack of medical access or medical care or medical equipment, accidents that are related to preparation or recovery from the storm. And the important thing to note here is the number of indirect fatalities over the last 10 years has been just as large as the number of direct deaths. So we've really made a focus of our messaging here at the Hurricane Center and in the Weather Service, and working with our partners in the media and the emergency management community to stress that post-storm safety, to encourage people not to leave themselves in a vulnerable location after a major storm affects their area, because they may be left in an area where there's no medical or emergency services or no power. And the vast majority of these indirect deaths are associated with major hurricane landfalls. So to wrap up, I'll just leave you with a list of resources here from the National Hurricane Center and the National Weather Service, as well as links to our products in GIS format that many people find useful, as well as links to some hurricane preparedness information. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you all this morning.